Good evening, everyone. We'd like to welcome you all to the February 4th monthly meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. The open meeting law requires that we notify the public that a recording of this meeting is being made by commission staff. And we'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Linda Eastley, co-chair of the Boston Civic Design Commission, and I'd like to thank the commissioners for their professional guidance that helps us shape the city of Boston into a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable city for all its citizens. For those joining us for the first time, the Commission meets 2 to 3 times each month to review projects proposed in the city and that are over 100,000 square feet or have other public significance. And we welcome you all. Tonight, Commissioners, we have only one project on our agenda. We have no votes. At the end of the meeting, we also have a brief update by Diana Fernandez on the Article 80 modernization, so we hope you can stay to participate in that. But first, we have a really important part of our agenda, and that is a thank you to Amy Chambers. For most of you know that for the past 2 years, Amy has been the Planning and Zoning Director for the City of Boston. And she's also been an ex officio member of our BCDC, which has been great. And for those of you who attend frequently, you know that Amy has added a lot of value to our meetings. She's helped to frame each of the projects, something that we haven't had before, frame them and give us the zoning context. So we wanted to say a special thanks to her on behalf of the commissioners. And I think, Diana, you also wanted to add your own thank you.
Absolutely. I also just wanted to make one quick clarification, Linda. We're going to be coming to you next month with the Article 80 modernization changes. So stay tuned for more information there. But yes, we wanted to share with this commission that Amy Chambers has departed from the planning department. As you know, Amy came to Boston to sort of launch citywide zoning reform and to put Boston on a path to a coherent municipal zoning code for our residents, for our development community, and for our staff. She delivered dramatic changes that will shape Boston for years to come. And in just 2 years, this is a long list, Amy oversaw the completion of 5 neighborhood plans, including Charlestown, Downtown, East Boston, Mattapan, and Newmarket. She also delivered the Austin Brighton Needs Assessment, managed the development of the ADU guidebook, and several zoning initiatives, including the citywide childcare zoning, a new use table within our zoning code, the squares and streets districts that were adopted into the zoning code, and the adoption of new development standards through inclusionary zoning, linkage, and net zero carbon, which was just approved last week at the Zoning Commission. She also launched Squares and Streets, the Austin Brighton Community Plan, the zoning reform impact tracker, tracking our progress along areas that have been recently rezoned, and the efficacy of the new zoning in creating faster timelines for projects to build, as well as reshaping the role of the planning department with its relationship to the Zoning Board of Appeal, and efforts to shift away from, one-off negotiations that were based on development approval. So she has really fundamentally reshaped the planning and zoning division, really included prioritizing comprehensive planning, enabling zoning reform, and centering the analysis of planning and zoning principles that you all get to benefit from as commissioners here with her guidance. We are really sad to see Amy go on a personal front. She was an incredible colleague, one that never shied away from engaging in thoughtful dialogue, and that brought the sort of best thinking to bear. So we're really sad to see her go, but excited to welcome Ted, who is joining from the planning team and will be filling in Amy's role as a planning representative and ex officio seat on the commission obviously in this meeting, but the many meetings to come. So we really want to thank Amy for her service and welcome Ted into this new role. And are excited to continue to support the commission with many of the things that Amy put into practice with her team.
Thank you, Diana. That was a really busy 2 years. Anyway, I know the commissioners join me in wishing her well in her new role in Connecticut. We will now turn to a roll call of the commissioners. And commissioners, if you could say present as I call your name. And I don't know if Ted is an official ex officio member of tonight, Diana, but
not tonight,
okay.
but we are working on the paperwork
Terrific.
to get Ted brought into the system next time. He will be here today to speak to the planning context for the 776 Summer Street project. But next month, we hope that he joins us as an ex officio member of the commission.
Great. So Ted, I'll give you a bye for tonight.
Thank you. Looking forward to next month.
We're glad to have you on board, Ted. Thank you. Diana Fernandez.
Present.
Shauna Gilly-Smith.
Present.
David Haseen.
Present.
McYoung Kim.
Present.
I haven't seen Kathy Kotaritis join us just yet. She might join a little later. Mimi Love.
Present.
David Manfredi.
Present.
Bill Ron.
Present.
Kirk Sykes.
Present.
And myself, Linda Eastley, present. Lizzie, I know we have some meeting minutes to approve, but since we don't have Christina with us, should we push those off until our March meeting?
I can go ahead and fill in for Christina today. So thank you and good evening, commissioners. Per the regulations of Article 28 and the Boston Zoning Code, Planning Department staff have prepared the following recommendations for your consideration. A proposed project known as Phase 2 of the L Street Station redevelopment at 776 Summer Street.
Oh, Diana, I'm sorry to interrupt. We were just talking about meeting minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. No worries. I know we have a couple of absences today, and so everyone, thank you for your patience as we move through these. I was just asking Lizzie if we wanted to go ahead and push off the approval of meeting minutes until our March meeting.
I think we could go ahead. Have you gotten a chance to review those meeting minutes?
They have not been distributed.
Okay, no worries. Then we can push this off to the next meeting. Thank you for raising that to our attention, Linda.
Thank you, Lizzie. I appreciate it. And now, after the meeting minutes, I think we're ready for a report from the review committee, which Diana will do to introduce our singular project, which is 776 Summer Street. And a quick note that Commissioners Love and Sykes are both recused from this project, so they do not need to vote. All right, Diana.
And just as a reminder to Commissioners Love and Sykes, it would be great if you stay on because we need quorum for tonight and want to make sure that you vote as recused. Going back to my script here, I won't bore you with the upfront section, but we'll go right into our report from subcommittee. A proposed project known as Phase 2 of the L Street Station redevelopment at 776 Summer Street in South Boston is seeking Article 80B entitlement. It contemplates the development of approximately 1 million gross square feet of residential, hotel, office, and retail uses, and approximately 1,214 off-street parking spaces in 4 buildings on approximately a 6.8 acre portion of a 15.2 acre site. In accordance with the previously approved PDA master plan and development plan, the proponent filed a supplemental information document on January 17th, 2025, and the planning department hosted a public meeting on February 3rd, 2025. Planning department staff recommend that the commission vote to review the proposed project. And that's all I have for you, Linda.
Thank you, Diana. I appreciate you. So commissioners, is there a motion to review 776 Summer Street?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor, please answer aye. Shauna Gilly-Smith? Sean, I think you're still on
Sorry,
mute.
yep, aye.
Thank you. David Hassin?
Aye.
McYoung Kim?
Aye.
I think Kathy has not joined us just yet. David Manfredi?
Aye.
Aye.
Was that your voice, Kathy?
It was,
Oh, great. You're here with us. I don't know if you
Ye-
want to vote or we're part of this. A motion to review 776
I
summer.
did hear it and I vote aye.
Thank you. David Manfredi?
Aye.
Thank you. Bill Ron?
Aye.
And myself, Linda Eastley. We will review. And since it's our only project for tonight, which is extremely unusual, we were all saying that we weren't sure we'd ever had a single project for a monthly meeting, we will go ahead and start the presentation tonight with 776 Summer. And I think, Ted, you're going to kick us off wearing Amy's shoes and give us the zoning context.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it, and look forward to working with you all. I had been involved in supporting Amy's work in a little bit more of a behind-the-scenes role. Looking forward to continuing that work with you in our new roles. So I'll start off with just 2 slides. Just want to remind folks that the last time this proponent was before the BCDC, the proponent sought a zoning entitlement via a zoning map amendment to allow a swap of uses from Block A at the top of the page to Block C at the bottom of the page. And at that time, it was understood that the proponent would be back to refine public realm as well as the orientation of the building and the design of the buildings as part of their large project review process, which brings them here this evening. Next slide, please. I apologize, the orientation is now rotating. So Block A.
Are we seeing the slides, Ted?
I'm able to see them. Bill, is it not showing up for you?
No.
I can see them as well.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Okay, and if you want to imagine in your mind's eye, we were looking at a site plan before, and now we've zoomed out to the larger context. And I brought up this
Okay.
slide.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
good. All right.
Great. So we brought up this slide just as a reminder of the surrounding uses that inform the review of this proposal by the planning department. So on the right side now of the site, Block A is across the street from Medal of Honor Park, and it directly abuts an MBTA power plant. Most recently, staff review of the building orientation and public realm around this building took into account MBTA input about the impacts of a residential use abutting an electric power generation facility. As a reminder, last time we were here was to talk about the swap of Block A and C uses, the lab and residential, and it was determined that having residential next to a power plant would be okay as long as it was designed well, and that will form the scope of tonight's conversation. And then also on Block C, wanted to remind folks that this project serves as a gateway to the neighborhood and plays a significant role in activating Summer and East First Street, as well as providing a connection to the waterfront and new open space. And the planning study undertaken during the initial review process, when this was still the Edison facility, it emphasized that intersection of Summer Street and First, and said that massing and floor plate changes driven by the proposed change in uses should be done in a way that considers city-making opportunities at this gateway location. So that was a planning finding for Block C and that corner that's been with us for a number of years now. And moving on now, I think I'll hand it off to urban design staff to review the actual proposal.
Great. Let's see if we pull up the urban design slides, I can speak to those. So we do apologize, there's quite a bit here. We do want to highlight from an urban design perspective that our team has been working really closely to assess the service area and to ensure that it's designed to have minimal impact on the public realm. So you can see that labeled as number 1. We've also focused on the second element, which is the building design, should also not mask the garage and service entry from the public right-of-way. So ensuring that we're really thinking about that public realm condition at the ground plane. And then our third comment here is to ensure that the corner spaces that are brought to bear by the design of this building should be supported by active ground floor building uses. So you'll see as this proponent gets into more information, how we can work together to realize some of that ground floor activation. Additionally, we've also been working on thinking through how the ground floor is creating those pedestrian scaled elements, particularly where it's disconnected from street elevation. So thinking through how the resiliency regulations impact some of those connections and how we can better design some of that ground floor from a programmatic and design standpoint. And then the final two elements here really focus on the vehicular access and specifically how do we ensure that we have minimal impact on the public realm and are thinking about the design of those right-of-ways to support a really vibrant neighborhood fabric. And then our last piece here is ensuring that there's additional study to ensure that this area positively contributes to the broader public realm network. So as Ted mentioned, there's a series of open spaces adjacent to this development site, as well as a really vibrant community fabric that we want to make sure we're stitching together with this project and being intentional about those key connections and intersections where we want to open up views and connectivity to other open spaces. And then from a massing standpoint, we've been working really closely with this team. One of the key considerations through the master plan was the respect for the neighborhood east of First Street, while still creating a really dynamic and active Main Street. So, you know, how is the articulation of the massing responding to that neighborhood scale while still maintaining an active storefront? And then we also really want to focus on clearly identifying and activating the corners along the Thomas Edison Way intersection and the opportunities between that and other public realm connections that are brought to bear as part of this project. And then finally, as noted earlier, masking the parking and service entry from the public right-of-way along Thomas Edison Way is a really critical factor, especially since that will serve as a critical corridor for future building program to connect to other public spaces and public realm opportunities.
Thank you, Diana. Oh, more massing. Sorry.
One more slide here. And we also wanted to speak to Block C and specifically highlight the importance of breaking up and activating the Summer Street edge of the block. It is a really wide stretch here that spans the entire block. So how is the articulation of the massing breaking up that scale and creating priority as pedestrians are moving through that? And then also really considering the orientation and positioning of the massing as a gateway to the neighborhood and a transition from that neighborhood scale. So how is it that we're thinking about how the massing itself sits in relationship to its context, and how do we bring to bear some of the elements that were really important to the original master plan approval that came through community process around that sort of articulation of massing, right? And its relationship to the neighborhood fabric and how we achieve a building program that addresses all those needs. And then for Block E, we also wanted to highlight the importance of the massing in helping to define and activate the corner of Thomas the Thomas Edison Way intersection. And specifically thinking about how the building design and massing can help frame and enable clear access to primary entries, including the hotel and residential lobbies. So how is the sort of landscape program and the key sort of ground floor activation working together to create a really vibrant public realm and also signify clear entry points for pedestrians moving through this space? Linda, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate it. All right, I think we're ready for the proponent team's presentation. And as the presentation is coming up, a quick reminder to the commissioners that this plan is not oriented north-south. So north is actually to the left of the site plan, just to give you a sense toward the water.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, Commissioner Easley. Well, thanks, everybody. Good evening. It's great to see all the commissioners again. I am Melissa Schrock, EVP at HRP Group. As staff explained, we're here tonight to review our Phase 2 SID filing that we recently filed for Article 80B review. As Ted mentioned, we were last before you in November, where we presented the development plan and related master plan amendment with refinements to uses on 2 of the blocks and refinements to the zoning envelopes on 3 of the 4 blocks in Phase 2. You approved those refinements at the November meeting. Next. Tonight, you're going to hear from our Phase 2 design teams, which includes Utiel as the architect of Block A, Arrow Street on Block B, Gensler on Block C, and SCB on Block E in the 1898 building, as well as JCFO, who continues as our landscape architect across the site. You probably remember them from the Phase 1. We're still very early in the design process, having only produced conceptual design packages at this point. Though we did have professional renderings done for the SID document, which you'll see tonight, but please just know that those are simply high-quality renderings of very early design concepts and not intended to represent final designs. Next. These are the topics we'll cover tonight. Next. And Ted put this up, so I won't spend a lot of time, but as a very quick project overview, this is the Phase 1 plan, which you approved in January of 2023, with blocks D and F framing the 3 Edison turbine halls and the waterfront promenade. Next. And now just layering in the 4 Phase 2 blocks, which are the topics of are the topic of tonight's discussion. Next. And then you will likely remember that these are the use and dimensional modifications that we brought before you in November, where Block C at the corner of Summer and East First becomes a commercial building, and Block A across from Medal of Honor Park becomes a residential building. The heights of those 3 buildings along East First Street are redistributed a bit while preserving the setback from the master plan on Blocks B and C. And then, as we discussed at our last BCDC meeting, these are diagrams kind of representing zoning envelopes, not actual building massing or design. Next. And then here on this image, Diana just showed you a few close-ups, but here on this image, you see the combined massing refinements that the Phase 2 design teams have been working on and what they're going to share with you tonight. Colin?
Thanks, Melissa. I'm Colin Curley, Senior Associate with Field Operations. We're the landscape architects on the project. And if you go to the next slide, just to kind of give a brief overview and refresher for those who are very familiar with Phase 1 on the public realm. Here, in terms of our approach to the public realm, we're thinking about the site as being kind of a collection of these 4 distinct precincts. Starting at the bottom in green, the Summer Street Gateway, really looking to activate the Summer Street edge with planting, bike lanes, and opportunities for retail spill out onto Summer Street. And so Block C, as far as this evening's discussion, really playing a role in that piece of the public realm. Also, how that public realm is turning the corner onto East First Street. The waterfront promenade from phase 1, celebrating industrial artifacts, providing public access to the waterfront and a variety of flexible and open program spaces. In orange at the center, the turbine precinct, kind of the historic core of the development, centered around the historic turbine halls. And beneath the word turbine precinct, turbine alley being that kind of key east-west, or one of the key east-west connections, new pedestrian connections through the site. And in pink, at the top of the page, is the Edison Plaza. This is most directly engaged by the buildings you'll see this evening. And that we're really seeing as kind of the welcoming draw for the neighborhood coming from M Street into the site, and providing a seamless connection down to the waterfront promenade. Go to the next slide here. Oh, is that, oh, there we go. This next slide here, you can see we've been working very closely with the block teams in terms of the relationship of massing and ground floor use to the public realm. So if you look down at Block C, looking at working with the Block C team on the articulation of the ground floor plane, opening up space for spill out and connections to that streetscape at the ground floor level. And then if you look also up at the intersection of Thomas Edison Way, kind of among the cluster of blocks A, B, and E, we've really been looking at the importance of that intersection of Thomas Edison Way, reinforcing kind of a strong park-like connection from the Edison Plaza through to the neighborhood, and vice versa. So you'll see the connection diagrams or diagrammatic lines there, opening up space and view corridors into the site, both to the 1898 building and then also along the plaza to the waterfront. And with that, I'll pass it over to Tim and the Block A team.
Great. Hello, commissioners. Next slide, please. I want to start with the massing strategy for Block A. Again, east is at the top. We've looking at the buildings that are across the spaces and streets of the project, we decided to break the mass of the building into 3 submasses. A longer mass along Service Drive, which extends past Thomas Edison Way, an intermediate length mass that faces across to Block B, and then a shorter mass that is in alignment with the street wall of East First Street. The logic of those decreasing sizes is that they each respond to the scale of the buildings either across the street or in the immediate adjacent area. The other advantage is that the short ends of those masses are another opportunity by objectifying those masses to break down the scale of the building even more, while having the entire project have some conceptual consistency. The other thing that you'll see is that we've rotated 2 of the 3 masses off the grid of East First Street and the larger South Boston grid. And that has a couple of advantages. One is it privileges more open space where we're proposing active ground floor uses. And I'll show that in the next slide. And secondly, the rotation helps to turn residential units away from a parallel relationship to the future lab building across the street. And the other advantage is that relative to the electric substation and the port beyond, it helps with some of the acoustic dynamics as well. Next slide. Dropping to the ground floor plan, you see the allocation of ground floor uses. We have a retail space at the 100% corner at East First Street and Thomas Edison Way. We've got the lobby at the seam between 2 of the masses opposite the lobby of Block B right across the street. And we have a series of amenity spaces on the opposite corner. And because of the rotation, those lean into and provide views down to the waterfront and in other directions too. As Diana mentioned at the beginning, we've been doing some work recently to disguise the loading dock and parking by pushing the plane of those functions back behind the facade. But that's probably a level of detail we'll get into with subcommittee. Next slide, please. In terms of the materiality of the project, the strategy is to treat each of the volumes with a slightly different color and tone, but a compatible color and tone. both for the upper facade materials and the base. And the references for that really are buildings in the context to create a kind of contextual street edge, which really ends the urban fabric of the project along East First Street before it opens up where the dog park and the Tommy Butler Park are. And then a view from what I call the M Street Park, the Memorial Park, looking into the project and the way that the rotation of our building, Block B, and Block E beyond kind of perform from a kind of perspectival standpoint. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Block B.
Thanks, Tim. My name is Jason King, an architect and principal at Air Street, and our team is developing the design for the residential building at Block B. So we go to the next slide. We have a few diagrams on screen that will outline how we've worked to sculpt and shape the zoning envelope approved at the master plan phase. Beginning with the top left diagram, we began by looking for ways to carve the zoning volume to improve sightlines and enhance those connections from the neighborhood into the 776 development, which is an important point of interest that we heard from the community during the phase 1 discussions. So moving to the image in the upper right, the northeast corner of the zoning volume is bent in and away from the Thomas Edison Way intersection, opening views from the neighborhood deeper into the site and exposing the historic 1898 building. This bending of the residential bar also serves to angle the residential units away from the adjacent blocks, creating some more open space between the buildings, opening up additional views to the sky for the public, as well as longer view corridors for the residents. Moving to the bottom right diagram, this pulling away from the corner also allowed us to expand the overall public realm by creating a new public open space at this northeast corner. And again, enhancing that intersection of where blocks A and B and E come together. This new open space works in concert with the Block A entry space that Tim just spoke of to expand the community's overall network, connecting the neighborhood from the Medal of Honor Park on the bottom of the image to the Edison Plaza and Waterfront Promenade beyond. And finally, moving to that bottom left diagram, the massing at the ground plane is strategically lifted up in various locations around the site to enhance the public realm around the building. At the corner of Thomas Edison Way and East First Street, the massing is held down to anchor the building and the corner retail space in a style consistent with other corner retail examples in the South Boston neighborhood. And along East First Street, the massing is pulled up with a portion of the ground floor stepping in to preserve open sight lines to Turbine Hall 3 and to align with its public pedestrian arcade that connects to Summer Street. This also creates an inviting porch space and pedestrian scaled element that extends the retail use to the exterior and activates the streetscape along the sidewalk that faces the neighborhood. And along Thomas Edison Way, the building lifts up and steps inward again at the residential lobby, signifying entry and further opening sight lines to the new corner open space, Block E, and 1898 building beyond. Next slide, please. And so here on screen now is the ground floor plan where you can see how the massing decisions at the ground plane begin to work in concert with the design of the public realm and the adjacent block designs as well. With regard to program, active uses are located along the major public street fronts, with retail space shown in red fronting East First Street and activating the sidewalk experience across from the neighborhood. The residential lobby, shaded in yellow, faces Thomas Edison Way to the east and is located across from the Block A entry to reinforce that lively and active street front facing Thomas Edison Way. Moving to the northeast corner, an active interior and exterior amenity space is shown in orange. That'll front the new public open space we mentioned earlier. And in plan, you can see how this carving away of this corner does open up views from Medal of Honor Park into the site and to the 1898 building, as mentioned before, and responds to the public open space designs fronting Block A, E, and F to help tie this area into a cohesive design. The building's loading dock, back of house, and MEP spaces are all located along the west facade facing Turbine Hall 3, which also has its loading, back of house, and MEP spaces facing this alley, which keeps these similar uses adjacent to each other and insulated from the more public-facing facades. As a result, the space between Block B and T3 will be specifically designed to minimize public access, allowing primarily for the Block B and T3 bike parking access points And to help emphasize Turbine Alley, which is located between Block C and Turbine Halls, as the active, high-quality pedestrian space that will connect the South Boston neighborhood to the waterfront. Next slide, please. We're early in concept design, and as we've begun developing the architecture, we've taken inspiration from the site's rich history within the South Boston neighborhood. Where the massing moves discussed previously aim to bring the community into the site, the architectural design is aiming to bring some of that site's history out to the community, bringing elements derived from the intricate systems of grids and patterns found in the turbine hall's interior architecture and machinery out to the facade expression. We're exploring materials with rich, warm color tones, such as masonry and metal panel, that can complement the neighborhood aesthetic and are inspired by some of the finer masonry details found in the South Boston neighborhood. With that, I'll pass it over to Victor and the Block C team.
Thanks, Jason, and good evening. I'm Victor Pachadi, Architect and Design Director at Gensler, and we're pleased to continue our Block C conversation, which we began last November. Next slide, please. This is a series of diagrams that illustrates the massing evolution from the zoning envelope, which you see in the frame in the upper left, and that's the envelope that you had seen last fall when we were talking about land use. Through a series of diagrams, the building evolves using a strategy of folding and vertical slots to both subdivide the mass as well as address specific urban conditions with each one of the folds. The folds are all moving inward or away from the site setbacks to further mitigate the mass in upper portions of the building and along the pedestrian realm to create broader, wider areas of pedestrian experience and the potential for indoor-outdoor relationships. Other drivers for some of the folding include the screening of loading and service areas to make those more discrete. Next slide, please. In the ground floor plan, we begin to see how some of the folds and inflections address the public realm. Along Summer Street, the building facade folds inward. In order to create a linear park, we are collaborating with Colin and the field operations team on combinations of greenscape and paved area to activate that linear park and also provide areas for spill out for retail, food and beverage, and so forth. The lobby is centrally located along the Summer Street facade. It's proximate to the bus stop off of Summer Street, which you see Kate wanding over there, and then located within the green alcove that you see directly north of the lobby is a Blue Bike station. North of the lobby, the retail area shown in pink projects further north, closer to Thomas Edison Way. That serves to screen and mask the loading area directly to the east of it, up on the plan. And as you'll see in the three-dimensional renderings, in concert with Block D, helps to frame and create a portal or a threshold as one enters the site. The retail to the right of the lobby along the south wraps from Summer Street all the way along East First Street and into Turbine Alley. The facade along East First Street also folds back and away from the building setback line at the two primary corners. At the Summer Street and East First Street corner, it is meant to ease the flow around the corner and also presents an opportunity for indoor-outdoor relationships or public art. The fold at the southeast corner similarly provides opportunity for indoor-outdoor programming, and perhaps more importantly, pulls away to allow ample view and access into the arcade that will be created along East First Street through Turbine Hall 3. Then in the blue-gray tone are some of the necessary back of house and support areas for research and development programming. Next slide, please. Our early exterior concepts are exploring a punched opening vocabulary at various proportions and rhythms that are found in the industrial typologies throughout South Boston. We are exploring a tripartite organization of the facade with a base, middle, and top that recalls some of the historic industrial lofts in the Fort Point neighborhood. And we're also exploring the material distinctions of a darker base, a lighter top. As other teams have suggested, materials are inspired by the South Boston context, including masonry, metals, and perhaps precast concrete. The image in the upper left is taken from the intersection of East First and Summer Street, as if we're standing in front of the Murphy's Law restaurant. In this one, looking along East First Street towards the east, it's a little bit distant, but you can see the facade folding away and an ample view into the arcade that will pass through the historic Turbine Hall 3. The lower mass along East First Street is capped at 72 feet. We're just a little bit lower than that to be harmonious and sensitive to the street wall and not exceed the height of Turbine Hall 3. The upper mass, we can see the fold or the inflection point along Summer Street, which we believe mitigates the length of that wall. And then there's a vertical glassy slot at each corner, which subdivides what would be one volume into a series of 4 wrapping planes. The rendering on the upper right-hand side is taken from today's Elkin Street and Summer Street intersection, looking east where the new Thomas Edison Way will be constructed. This is the moment where the 4-story projecting mass of Block C aligns with a recessed opening on Block D and together creates this threshold that welcomes arrival into the site, and just as importantly, screens the loading that's tucked in behind that 4-story mass and makes the portal through the Turbine Hall highly visible. And with that, I'll pass it to Devin and Block E.
Thank you very much. My name is Devin Patterson. I'm a principal at SCB, and I'm leading our team is leading the design of the integrated building between the residential hotel and the existing 1898 building. Next slide, please. As we started to look at the design of this tower, which sits in the center of the development, right between Block F, B, and D there, and also between the 1898 building. The original starting point for this was more of a mass that was rectangular in shape that paralleled what's called Edison Plaza right now. We do want to separate the 1898 building from the new building that we're proposing on the site. And we're doing that with that sort of blue buffer that you see between the 2 towers there, or 2 buildings. And so part of the reason for that is we're looking to preserve some of the existing relics inside the building. This is a fantastic historic structure, and we want to expose those sort of hidden histories of the 1898 building as we develop the design of this project. As you looked at the massings on the number 2 massings there, we looked at taking that rectangular shape and actually angling the facade, or angling the building itself. This had 2 benefits for the project. First was to open up the open space on the ground floor and respond to Block B's open space that they're developing in front of their plaza there as well. So it does provide additional open space for the whole development. It also allows the views to be sort of angled away from Block F and look towards the neighborhoods both to the north and the south, Boston there. It also allows us to continue to have that buffer between our building and the 1898 building. And as you mentioned earlier, one of the key things we want to think about is the relationship of the ground plane to these buildings. And so in diagram 3 there, we were talking about how we're doing that in 2 different ways. The ground plane, as it faces towards Thomas Edison Way, takes a nod from the 1898 building. So the scale of those 2 are sort of aligned at that location right there. And then as you look at the building as it faces towards Edison Plaza, we've taken cues from the Block F building that's across the street there. So this building actually has 3 different datums that are being implied onto it that help to sort of organize the public realm of this project. And then as mentioned earlier, we really need to have a defined entry to this building. And so what we've done is actually set back the ground floor plan of this building to create a covered vehicular and pedestrian drop-off at the front door there. And we'll see those in some elevation perspectives here in a minute. Next slide, please. So in just walking around through the entire ground plane here, this building does front onto 3 different sides here. So on the left-hand side, which is to the north, is the waterfront promenade. You'll see the 1898 building. We've started to think about hotel event space inside that building that would front onto that plaza to the north there, potentially having windows into it that would allow a ballroom space in there to get natural light into it. And there's also other meeting spaces being proposed inside there to activate the waterfront. To continue to activate the waterfront, the hotel lobby and the existing smokestack, which is in the center there, will look out onto the plaza to the west or to the north there, and as well as potential active uses like restaurants or things like that, or bars that are associated with the hotel lobby could spill out onto that space as well and have great views of the waterfront and back towards Boston as well. And then looking out, that also looks out onto the Edison Plaza as well as the residential lobby, which we've located in the upper right-hand corner there as well. We did want to differentiate the residential lobby from the hotel lobby, so there is a bit of a gap between those two. And you'll see that we've really focused on developing a residential and hotel drop-off that really creates a safe passage for bicycles and pedestrians by the site and into the drop-off area there. So the idea is to bring cars in off of the street, have them progress down to the common loading area at the bottom of the page here and enter into the loading area or the parking area to the left, and then exit out onto Thomas and Edison Way, which is part of the switch house loading area as well. We think that really helps to create a very sort of distinguished entrance to the building. It also gets all the traffic off of the streets so that it's not creating bottlenecks of traffic as you're going by the site here as well. Next slide, please. And as part of our design inspiration, we were very intrigued with the history of the 1898 building. And this building has been closed off for many, many years from the public. And so we want to expose those hidden histories as we do our work to design the interior of this building. And some of the images at the top there are some of the photographs of the existing turbine that's on the right-hand side that's inside the building. You can also see as you look up, there's a beautiful clay tile roof with some steel structure in there. There's lots of all the walls are glazed tile, so you get this beautiful sort of white material on the inside. So a lot of those materials we want to expose as we develop the design. But the thing we were most interested in as we started to think about the design of the tower was the rotor that sat inside those casings of the turbines to the right there. And we looked at that as sort of our inspirations with the blades and things like that are inside there as an opportunity to sort of think about how we might use sort of the innovative design of this turbine that really powered Boston for many years and use that as sort of an innovative beacon for this project at the center of the site here. And so we've got a couple of different architectural ideas that we're currently working on here. There's one in the upper left-hand corner and one in the lower right-hand corner. They're both design schemes that were sort of at the initial stages of our design thinking for this project. But the idea is to create a base that responds both to the 1898 building and block F to the right there. So you can see sort of those breaks that are happening in the building. Those breaks might actually go up into the building to further distinguish it. But the idea is to create sort of this verticality and differentiate the tower materiality from the base materiality to create a very symbolic or icon for the neighborhood. So I think that wraps up what we're thinking about here, and we're happy to talk about whatever questions you may have about our designs.
All right, thank you.
That's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot, and I want to say how much I appreciate such a
Yeah,
well choreographed
yeah.
presentation. There were a lot of speaking voices, and it was clear that you guys all organized ahead of time, so we really appreciate that. So, commissioners, we are looking at kind of an 80B review of 4 different sites, A, B, C, and then E. And there's a high likelihood that we are going to be splitting this up and looking at different sites and different issues and challenges in subcommittee. And so what I'd like to do is open the floor to comments from each of you, and then I'd like to come back together and create a plan for how we might review these in a way that makes the most sense and gives us time at each of the other subcommittees should we vote it through. And so, and Lizzie, I do see that we have a public comment. Do you want to just talk about the fact that we'll take commissioners first?
Yeah, of course. We'll take commissioners first and then join over to public comment once those commissioner comments are done.
Thank you. So commissioners, if you have a comment, please raise your hand, and if your hand isn't working, you can wave it wildly and I will look for you. David Haseen, I see your hand up.
Oh, am I the first? Okay.
You are the first.
Oh dear. Okay. First of all, I just want to say I thought this was a really excellent presentation. You've covered a lot of ground, and it's really exciting to see how the design has evolved and to see the obvious coordination between planning and the slides that we saw at the beginning of the presentation and how those were effectuated in the design. And in general, I think there's a lot to like here. I think that the design principles are really clear, and I feel like the public realm concepts are also very clear. I guess I just have a couple of questions. And I don't know how we're going to split this up when we review it, but I have a couple of questions that maybe can be answered, at some point. One of them has to do with the programming of the ground plane, and it seems to me that there's been a strategy to activate the perimeter of the development with retail along First Street and I can't remember what letter is the one that's going the other direction, but basically around the perimeter from the Gensler building all the way around, and then thank you, Summer Street, thank you. So to basically create retail along Block C. I think the ideas about stepping back to sort of reveal the Turbine Hall at Block C and B seems really thoughtful and smart. There's clearly retail on the corner of Block B and Block A that again fronts East First Street. And then there's this really dynamic center where A, B, E, F, and all of that are facing. And it's interesting to me that it appears that it's all residential lobbies and residential amenities that are facing that space. And I guess I'd like to understand a little bit more about what the concept is for how public that space is, and what the character of that space is relative to the activation of the streets. It's personally, when I think about where a restaurant could or should be, or retail could or should be, I think I would want to migrate to the heart of this project where there's, trees and green space and more proximity to the water, not necessarily on First Street, which, is not a street that has a strong retail identity, at least not at this point in time. And so that's just something I would like to understand, because it looks like it's a strategic decision. And yet there is a hotel at the middle of the project, which feels like it would be a very public place to go for, food and beverage and all the rest of it. So that's a question for the team that maybe we can come back to. The other thing that I would say is that I think that the architectures for Block C, B, and A that has initially been shown all looks very handsome, very, very clean, thoughtful, handsome, relatively quiet relative to the context and the neighborhood. And I understand that and actually very much appreciate it. It does put a lot of pressure in my mind on Block E as a signature element, as a tower that you see from distances, and even the views that we saw where I think the teams from Arrow Street and Utile were explaining the view corridor that is being established to look back at the tower. That's a very powerful, thank you, the upper right. That's a very powerful image. And when the Block E building was described with the turbine and so forth, I really love that idea. I love the image of it, and the way you're thinking about the building, both in terms of it separating from the historic building, but also being a distinctive shape and marker. But I do wonder if it needs to be even more exuberant architecturally. Certainly at the top of the building, relative to this very important position that it plays as an anchor in the rest of the development. Like the notion that the buildings along East First are handsome, quiet buildings that are deferring to the detail and the prominence of the turbine hall makes a lot of sense to me. But I do crave a I don't know what the right word is, but prominent contemporary architectural statement at the center of the development that can be seen from afar. And one of my requests would be if we could, this view is very important, but like, what does this building look like, from the seaport or from beyond? Like, what does this marker look like on the skyline? And how do I know like where I'm going, essentially to get to this development? So those are just two thoughts that maybe we could take a look at together at the right moment. Thank you. But very, very nice project. A lot of very, very good decisions here.
David, thank you. Shauna?
Thanks, Linda. Thank you to all for the presentation. It's an extremely exciting project. And could we maybe go to the plan, the page 29? I think that might be most helpful. So in general, I actually love this idea of kind of cracking the middle open where the edges are generally following an orthogonal strategy, and in the middle it kind of cracks open to give space, or it feels like it to give space to the public realm, and that I very much appreciate. One area that you had mentioned as a significant element of the public realm that I think may need thinking more about is Turbine Alley. And that struck me most in the Block C presentation, when there's a grade difference between the alley itself and the retail, and then the service of the blue is really directly fronting onto that alley. So for that alley, I actually would really like to understand overall what the specific character of the public realm and the porosity of the pieces with respect to the inside-outside interface. And that really comes to the biggest question for me, and what I would like to understand more holistically and specifically within the project from the public realm is the elevation change and the grade change between the public programs and the sidewalk. I can see a few places where there's a few stairs, and I don't know what the sort of base elevation that's being used for the ground plane, but in many other projects in the seaport, we're dealing with 4 or 5 feet of grade difference. So trying to understand that on a global project with respect to the overall project, is there ways that you're achieving that by elevating the roadways as well? Or is it specific to the building or to the super block areas? And then I'd like to know from a sectional perspective, when we start looking at each of these buildings, what that relationship is to the street and you know and the ground plane, because it can be pretty significantly different. And we want to make sure that to enhance the vibrancy. So that's really my big ask for when the projects come back to subcommittee, is to understand that grade relationship between the programs, as well as continuing to work on the challenges of some of these big service areas, which I understand are required for the program, but how does that impact the public realm experience? Oh,
Okay.
and sorry, I realize
6:30 now?
I turned my
Is that so terrible?
I had turned my video off. I apologize. I didn't mean to do that.
No problem, Shauna. We could hear you clearly. All right, thank you. David Manfredi.
Thanks, Linda. I'm going to echo my fellow commissioners. This is a really good presentation, and both in its graphics, but also in your delivery, meaning that the parts, the way you put it together, you obviously spent a great deal of time, as someone said, coordinating, and I thought it was all very thoughtful. I'm wondering about a couple of things, and I'm not really challenging as much as I'm looking when you come to subcommittee to talk about these. And here's the most philosophical one, which is that the historic buildings, the buildings of Boston Edison, are very regular, very orthogonal pieces that have everything to do with what occurred inside them. And then we saw buildings B and F, and they varied a little bit from that, but we're also quite regular in their footprint. And what I mean by that is observing the block structure and street walls and their relationship to block structure, but varied a little bit more than the very simple floor plans. And now there's 4 buildings, and each have adopted a different, in different ways, a attitude about the ground plane and different buildings, but also about the massing, in which there's some challenge to the regularity of the urban grid. And I see it specifically on First, and it feels very, thank you. It feels very deliberate, but I don't know if it is or not, and I'm wondering if it is, and I'm wondering how you all thought about that together or separately, or came to what seems like similar conclusions together or separately. And what I'm wondering is all of that the subtle and quite handsome, by the way, building by building, but all of the subtle shifting of planes off of First Street and off of Summer Street. How coordinated are they? Are they the right thing to do? Is there an exterior edge and an interior formed by very regular streets, Summer and First, and an interior geometry that could be quite irregular based on the irregularity of the, what's it called, the Thomas Edison Way? And I mostly want to hear, I'm not suggesting anything except that I would love to hear you talk about that, whether it's the 4 teams in together or however we decide to, whether it goes separately. This is a very important drawing, and I think that the earlier points that were made are really really good. I really want to understand at the ground floor. I think it was David who talked specifically about the retail and whether it's on the perimeter or it draws together in that space where Thomas Edison Way and Thomas Edison Way intersect. I didn't really say it was the same. And whether that's the center, or is there a perimeter strategy and the center strategy, or I'd like to hear you talk about that. This would be, by the way, really important project to see in a model, and makes me yearn ever more for models and co-location. And then my last question is specific about Block E, and it is the relationship of this kind of driveway and drop off to the street. And I think about this always on Atlantic Avenue, where you have the Intercontinental Hotel and the Boston Harbor Rosa Wharf buildings and Boston Harbor Hotel, where the drop off crosses the sidewalk, crosses the public realm, and comes close to the building. And if that is a strategy that has been successful there, and if that's a strategy that's the right thing here, because it does bring the vehicle across the public realm and into what seems like a much more pedestrian environment. And I would like to hear more about that. And I do challenge, in this case, I do challenge whether that's the right thing to do in terms of drop off, streetscape, and pedestrians. But I have to say, when we look at when I look at each individual building, I think you've all done really good work here. And this is a wonderful project. I see it. I see the site every day from the back of the building we're in. And so I will watch it all evolve. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Kathy, Bill, or McYoung? Any comments? Bill, it looks like you're on mute.
Maybe we could talk about how we're going to parse this project out, because I feel like it has a big impact on Boston, and I think it's important to do this carefully. I'm not going to repeat what fellow commissioners said. I think there's a lot of really good comments that came out of this, and I think this is one project where we shouldn't separate out landscape from the architecture, and so I'm a little bit at a loss how to structure the review of this, but I have found, I'm grateful that today we don't have any other projects to review, and I just wonder, I could see like one night where you just review this, but I think my brain would work better if they were seen as like maybe all three projects are seen individually with their contiguous landscape, and then at the end, you see them all together, or vice versa, or something like that, as a kind of, I don't know, as a way, instead of breaking it up over days, or sometimes we break up these larger projects by ground floor, public realm. But for me, it feels like you want to kind of see them, you want to be able to see it from all together, and then you want to see it individually a little bit more. So just thought I'd open up that discussion, because I think all of the comments will delve a little bit deeper as we move forward.
Thank you, McYoung. I just, Bill, I know that you were muted while you were talking as well. Do you want to chime in, and then we can switch gears to the organization?
Yeah.
Thank you. You can hear me now.
Yes.
Trouble raising my hand. I can't find the hand raising element, but by next week I'll find it.
So Bill, it's changed. If you
Yeah.
actually click on the heart that says react instead of pulling on the caret, if you pull on the caret, you can't find it. But if you actually click on the heart that's right above react, it'll let you raise your hand. I had to find out the hard way as well.
Okay, but where is it?
Anyway, you have the floor.
What?
I said, anyway, you have the floor.
Okay, well, then I may get one of you, Linda, to tell me how I don't bother everyone with my incompetence. So I will speak and then learn how to raise my hand. I want to really echo what David was talking about. I will say that I have long really appreciated this project. I have the sense that the development team is very thoughtful and gives a level of freedom to the architects to engage in very good design explorations. And so I was always very happy with the project 1 and 2 years ago. You know, I still am. The issue that David was raising, however, is a really important one, because what's happened is, yes, the historic buildings are orthogonal to the street grid, but all the other buildings are now not orthogonal, purposely so. And each of you explained why you were opening up views and all of that. But the result is that it's not as powerful a composition of those non-orthogonal elements. And yes, the hotel tower may be very nice, but the others all have these chipped away edges, which also, for the open space around them, create a large number of wedge-shaped open spaces, which I don't know if they're that inhabitable. And so while I agree with David that there's a lot of quality of what we've been seeing, I'm a little nervous about the overall idea that you all must have discussed together of breaking up the shaping of the non-historical buildings. And I would love to have one session in the committee meetings really devoted to this question. And if we don't, it'll be left out until the very end. And so I would just want to understand how the composition of a series of non-orthogonal shaped buildings is going to lead to something that's memorable and architecturally powerful.
Thank you, Bill.
I wonder, oh, I don't know if anyone else is, I was going to speak to how we might review it, but maybe there are other commissioners who want to speak.
Oh, David, pardon me for interrupting. Oh, the one thing David Manfredi alluded to that I think is very important, can't on this kind of massing level, we have a model that we can really understand what we're talking about here? It just seems to be crying out for that, because otherwise all we're doing is looking at site plans and not really understanding their relationship to one another. So that would be a strong urging I'd make. And I'm sorry, David Hessine.
No, not at all. I mean, I think it
Yeah.
actually plays into the.
Or, sorry, David, or Bill, what if it were like a walkthrough that gave us a 3D walkthrough where we could, there was some flexibility because I feel like a physical model is helpful, but hard to see through Zoom.
Yes.
So maybe there could be a walkthrough where, I know designers hate this, but we could say like, take me to the left, take me to the right, and things like that, within reason. We know this is a big project. So anyways, David Hessine, I know you wanted
No,
to.
I was just going to say that, Mick Young, relative to your comment about how we review this after listening to David and Bill, it makes me think that this issue of the larger massing strategy, the grain of the buildings, the overall, and that impact on the ground plane is a meeting that involves everyone before there might be, or before there is a sort of, let's say, secondary meeting or another meeting to get into the, let's say, nitty gritty of the landscape or the nitty gritty of the architecture. It feels to me like that first discussion is probably its own discussion. And then that sets up maybe, I'm just making a suggestion here, sets up two groups, let's say, to review architectural detailing and landscape detailing, perhaps.
Another thought, I do think that a lot of comments were around this notion of urban design form, whether, how buildings and landscape occupy this site. So I do think that would be a really good first meeting. Three of these buildings are adjacent to one another, A, B, E, and their open space, I think, would be difficult to look at if it weren't compositionally. So that might be an idea of looking at A, B, and E. And I like the idea too that we might have even a double session to look at the kind of buildings and open space in a way that we would be able to dive in a little bit longer and not kind of have an artificial break when the hour was up.
Yeah.
So if meeting one is urban design form and meeting two that might be a double block allowed us to go through the different compositional pieces, I think that could be really effective. One of the other comments I was going to add in the commissioner comments was the fact that I think also that the corridors are really key, and understanding how you'll experience Summer Street and how you'll experience East First Street, and then how Thomas Edison Way, first it runs kind of, west to east, and then it turns 90 degrees and actually becomes one of the gateways to the site. I think it would be really important to understand how that street operates as a strong urban design presence, and also how one knows that you have to make that turn because the extension becomes service drive and kind of terminates in an odd way. So I think it would be important for us to understand that street structure and the visual cues that have you actually make that turn south along Thomas Edison Way that then connects to M Street, I think would be important. How do you all feel about that?
I think that makes sense. I'm
I
sorry.
think that makes sense. I think both what you and David are saying makes sense. I'd like to talk about personnel a little bit. We don't have a full house today, Linda, and I'm just wondering if we usually don't do this, but we choreograph it so that there's a core consistent team reviewing this project. And I don't know if that's possible, so that there's a clarity to the project now. And I want to make sure that the proponent doesn't kind of come back and see lots of different people and get different advice. It's a complex project, and I worry that a complex group of voices could confuse the process. So it might be, I don't think I have the bandwidth tonight to figure it out, but that's a concern I have as well, is to make sure that there's at least consistent personnel.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment. And I don't know if you all have noticed, but it's been one of our goals over the last year. So you'll notice that we have been trying to have the same commissioners on a project throughout subcommittee. It's not perfect because we all have other commitments as well, but that has been an earnest goal. And so I think we'll continue that for this project. And if we're able to get a double block in a subcommittee, which again, I think would be really helpful so that we can continue the conversation, we'll try to keep that same forum in there.
Because I imagine that we won't have the luxury we have tonight in the future. And does this project warrant a special day or something like that? Just
Yeah,
make
I
sure this
agree.
doesn't go at the end of the evening.
I think Linda and Mimi, Meek Young,
go ahead.
these are really helpful comments. I also think that the comments we got from Bill and from David around the sort of physicality of understanding the scale of this project are really important. They're the same questions we've been asking. We often make physical models available to commissioners to come and view here at City Hall. So that's something that will stand true for this project. As Linda mentioned, we'll be working at a staff level to ensure the consistency and the review of this project as it moves forward. And specifically, how we think through how we want to go about either, the 3D view or the double subcommittee slot, and supplementing that with any sort of physical model elements as needed. So I think we really appreciate those comments. And Linda, before we fully deliberate, I want to make sure we make space for public comment.
Yes. And Lizzie just noted that we've come to the end of our 25-minute comment period, which kudos to the commissioners. We did beautifully and got all the voices in. So we will kind of make a proposal and work with Diana and Christina on how we can review this project, and we'll discuss about the vote for subcommittee in just a moment. But with that, Lizzie, do we have any public comment?
I'm going to go ahead and make a quick announcement here. So at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute to public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function, and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep comments to 2 minutes. I know we had a hand earlier. Let's see. Yes, could you unmute, please?
Hello, my name is Eileen Smith, and I want to thank the commissioners tonight for slowing down the process. I am a member of the IAG, a lifelong resident of South Boston, and my address is 7760 East Broadway. So yes, I am very concerned with the architectural plans of the site. I don't understand why, and I think the commissioners made a lot of indications to the way I feel. There's so many different designs of the buildings. There's no consistency. The variations and the sizes and the materials, they really don't relate to each other. And I also, one of the comments by Mr. Ron, the composition will not be memorable. He's absolutely right. It is currently going to be what I call a mini seaport. There's no historical relationship. There's no harmony to our current neighborhood, which is very alarming. And I do think that we don't need to have industrial exploring lofts from Fort Point considered for design review. I think that there's nothing really relatable from the seaport for these building designs. I am concerned with the building, the hotel, which is build Block E. To me, visually, it's a monster. I think that it's really problematic as far as the design, and for the most part, that will be the shiny metal building that blocks the complete residential neighborhood. And I just have one thing that I would like to say that really isn't relevant to design review, but it is. So we recently were told that a promise of affordable housing to that location may not happen. And so maybe with design review, the space can be found to secure affordable housing on site, which was one of the commitments with this project going forward. And thank you for your help tonight. I really do think that there are so many outstanding architectural issues, and I do appreciate all of the commissioners' comments tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Yas, for your comments. And let's see, I don't see any other hands. So Linda, I think that concludes our public comment period.
Thank you, Diana. We did have a public comment that was entered into the chat. Do we want to read that into the record?
Absolutely, I can go ahead and read that. Thank you for catching that. So Christy Kaza noted in the chat, have to jump off, but wanted to comment, longtime South Boston resident, business owner, retail store front types with an on Summer Street entrance need to be taken into consideration. People just double park to go to Dunkin' on L Street, I'm assuming, or PS Gourmet on Dorchester. And if there's no parking in front of the retail, people will just double park. It's a huge issue in South Boston at this time. Renderings look like no easy parking and a few spots in front of retail. Oh, and I see that there's another hand. Luann, could you unmute, please?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. This is my first time attending a BCDC meeting, so I'm learning a lot. So thank you for that. And I am commenting on, I guess, the architecture as well. A couple of comments were made that it is light industrial and trying to fit into the fabric of the neighborhood. So I'm not really sure which neighborhood it's being looked at. You can cross East First Street, and that is in fact light industrial. New zoning was put into there. And then, but on the side where the Edison plant actually is, that abuts up to First Street, that really is residential. It's the part of South Boston where it's changing on First and Second Street, but we do want our buildings to blend in. And I don't feel as though there are some of the buildings that are very nice and that I like, and then there are others that are really far off. I would also like for your commission to look at the heights of the different buildings, particularly along First Street. They wanted to swap out the buildings, as you know, and that is residential. But the building materials of metals with brick, you can see an example of it across the street. It's not attractive. And this site is in fact 15 acres. So we want it to fit into the South Boston neighborhood, not necessarily the seaport. So we don't want it to be overtaken because it is part of the residential neighborhood. So I think there's a lot more work to be done here. I'm not sure why there are so many architectural firms designing individual blocks, but I'm looking forward to learning more. I appreciate the comments, and thank you for the commissioners to also understand not only the developers, but also the neighborhood of South Boston. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luann, for your comments. If there are any additional hands, can you please raise them and we can call on you? Okay, Linda, I don't see any additional hands. I think this can conclude our public comment period.
Thanks, Diana, and thanks for the 3 public members that shared their testimony tonight. Commissioners, we have some ideas on how we can proceed. Do we have a motion to send this to subcommittee?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Aye.
McYoung Kim,
Aye.
Kathy Kotaritis,
Aye.
David Manfredi,
Aye.
Bill Ron,
Aye.
and our 2 recused members, Mimi Love
Recused.
and Kirk Sykes.
Recused.
Thank you. And myself, Linda Eastley, aye. We will see you in subcommittee. Thank you for a great and thorough presentation.
Thank you, commissioners.
Linda, can you stay on the line to give me a lesson on how to raise my hand in the new?
Sure, I can. Yeah. We're gonna, we are going, as Diana said, instead of talking about Article 80 update today, we will do that next time. And I don't think we have any other business, Diana or Lizzie.
I think the motion is in order.
All right, so would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn the
So
meeting?
moved.
And a second.
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 And all in favor, please say aye. Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Bye.
McYoung Kim,
Aye.
Kathy Kotaritis,
Aye.
Mimi Love,
Aye.
David Manfredi,
Aye.
Bill Ron,
Hi.
Kirk Sykes,
Aye.
and myself, Linda Eastley. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your night. Enjoy your early night.